Now, some things still come easily to these children, but when a problem doesn't turn out to be simple, they give up, and almost immediately. Now, it turns out that when we tackle fewer and fewer problems that are difficult, only attempting those problems or tasks at which we know we will succeed, it actually changes our neurobiology, making us more likely to give up, making us less resilient, and less capable of delayed gratification. So what does this mean? If we want to be resilient in the face of struggles and difficulty, which are obviously a fact of life, yes, we have to practice taking risks in our lives in which we do not succeed so that we can learn how to fail and keep going. So we have to practice failing, right? You see, it turns out that children whose failures are brushed aside or ignored and who are consistently praised only with the positive, those children underrate the importance of effort. Another study mentioned in the book claims that a child may come to believe that failure itself is something so terrible that the family can't even acknowledge its existence. It becomes this great unspoken thing that shall not be named, and therefore actually has more power over the child. Now, later in my life, I had a step-parent who named every failure, so that's not good either. So FYI. But talking to our children about failure, letting them fail, letting them see our own failures, giving them opportunities to fail in a safe space, and then taking the time to coach them through that failure with coping strategies, what they could do differently, how to improve specifically, may in fact be more important than any positive reinforcement. Now, maybe you're in disbelief. There has been 4 decades of self-esteem movement going on. So maybe you're in disbelief. The authors certainly were, and one of them is the parent of a young boy, and she walks us through her struggle with making the switch to this kind of praise and how her son responded. So the book is great, so I suggest you get it. But what I want to share with you are 2 different studies that they highlight in the book that might help you make the shift. The first was conducted by Stanford faculty member Carol Dweck and involves 3 different rounds of IQ testing using puzzles. They're very similar to the ones that I took when I was a child. In the first round, Dweck sent researchers into 5th grade classrooms in New York City and gave students IQ tests that were below grade level. So they were easy enough that all the kids would do fairly well. Now, after the testing with each child, the researcher told them their score and then gave them one single line of praise. They either said, "Wow, you must be smart," or they said, "Wow, you really tried hard." Then the researchers offered those students another test. They were told that they could choose either one that was explained to be harder than the first test, but they would learn a whole lot from trying, or they could take another test that was just like the first one, guaranteeing their success. Of those students who were praised for their effort, 90% chose the harder set of puzzles. Of those praised for their intelligence, the majority chose the easier test. So what this means is that when we praise our children for their intelligence, we're sending them this message that says, look smart at all costs. Don't risk making a mistake, and avoid being embarrassed. Now, that was round 1. In round 2 of the test, no matter whether or not they said they chose a harder test or an easier one, they were in fact given a test that was more difficult. It was a grade level above where they were, and everyone failed. Those who had been praised for their effort, though, got really involved in the test, wanting to try every possible solution to the puzzle before they gave up. Many of them even remarked completely unprompted, "This is my favorite test." Those praised for their smarts assumed that their failure was just more evidence that they really weren't smart at all. Much like my own experience, each failure was just more proof stacking up against them that they had been found out. So after the researchers essentially inserted a round of failure with that more difficult test, there was round 3. So in round 3, the students were given one final test, and this last test was exactly the same as the first one, so it was one below grade level, one that they were expected to do well on. Those who had been praised for their effort following a round of failure significantly increased their scores by 30%. Those who had been praised for their intelligence following that round of failure dropped their scores by 20%. The exact same test. So the issue is, what does failure do to our psyche if we don't know how to deal with it? So in follow-up interviews with these children, Dweck learned that those who believe that the innate intelligence is the key to success began to discount the importance of their effort. So expending any effort at all became stigmatized as some kind of public proof that you don't have any natural gifts. And in other studies, it was clear that it directly affected their moral choices as well, because it changed the game. If the most important thing is not what we're saying it is, and instead is the unspoken, most powerful message of the real game to appear flawless, then the game changes, and so does the strategy. Overpraised children, it turns out, become more competitive and more interested in tearing others down in order to protect themselves. Image maintenance becomes their primary concern, and incidences of cheating increases. So having taught in a gifted school, an international baccalaureate school, much like Booker T here in Tulsa, I taught in a school like that for about 7 years in Dallas. I can tell you I know this to be true. My low-performing students were actually more moral. They were making more moral choices than some of my gifted students who blamed it on pressure. See, it wasn't my low performers who couldn't be trusted on exams or to copy. It was my gifted kids, my IB kids, and they got really good at it. But they did it because that was how they read the situation. The most important thing was to maintain that image of intelligence and, of course, not to get caught. So they also had to be the best at cheating. So that's the first study. The second study I want to tell you about is Dweck's protege, Dr. Lisa Blackwell. She conducted further research testing the impact of believing that we're born smart or believing that the brain is a muscle. Blackwell followed 700 students who were classified as low achieving in math. She split the children into 2 different groups for an 8-session workshop. The control group was taught basic study skills. The test group was taught the same basic study skills, but was given a special module on how intelligence is not innate. They took turns reading an article on how the brain grows neurons when it's challenged. They saw slides of the brain and its cells, and they acted out skits demonstrating the brain is a muscle. In a single semester, after 8 workshops, they saw the students' long-time trend of decreasing math grades completely reversed. And the only difference were those 2 lessons, a total of 50 minutes, spent not teaching math, but offering a single idea that the brain is a muscle and must be exercised, stretched, and challenged. It was a lesson that they had an impact on their own outcome.